if you're 12 years old, this is going to really hit the sweet spot.
Thanks.
But if there's our cold open.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. My name is James, joined as ever by my friend Steve. This episode, we are talking Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Hey, but you know the drill. If you haven't already subscribed, it'd be a great favor to us if you did. And just as a reminder, we do spoilers here, so you've been warned. James, let's talk about Volume 3 of those Guardians of the Galaxy.
That's right. And yes, this one does require a spoiler warning because we're going to get into it because things happen. This is the 32nd official MCU movie, and we are now deep into Phase 5. This is the third official Guardians of the Galaxy movie. I think it's the 7th appearance by the Guardians, if you include the Christmas special. And essentially, we find Peter Quill and Groot and Rocket, etc., all hanging out on Nowhere. You know, the floating city in the head of a dead god where they like to hang out. And Peter Quill in particular is
as one does.
Yeah. You know, why not hang out in the floating inanimate dead skull of a god? Yeah. It looked cozy. Peter Quill is not happy. He is reeling from the fact that Gamora died, and then she kind of came back due to some sort of blip snap related cross-pollination of timelines, and she doesn't remember him. No, certainly doesn't remember the fact that they were in love, and she's now a Ravager off marauding with Sylvester Stallone and some of the other Ravagers that we saw from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now their little hangout on Nowhere is rudely interrupted by Adam Warlock, played by Will Poulter, who is sent by the High Evolutionary to check up some trouble, and it results in Rocket being very badly injured, and they go to operate on him, and they find that he has been installed with a kill switch. And so essentially what the film is, it's a race against time to go and find those responsible for creating this, what would you even call it, sort of Dr. Moreau-esque sort of distortion of nature that is Rocket Raccoon. Find the creators in order to find a pass key that will get them past the kill switch so they can save his life eventually.
Sounds like a video game.
It sounds like a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
You know, and I've got to be honest, straight out the blocks. You know, it's 32 of these now, and I was getting a little bit tired, particularly with the last one, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, where there was just a lot of stuff going on, and none of it had any weight, any depth, any agency, and it was a bit of a slog.
Yeah.
However, I got to be honest, I kind of actually really loved this one. It reminded me of what was so much fun about these movies in the first place and why the Marvel juggernaut franchise has become so successful. This was essentially, you know, in many ways a similar kind of adventure, you know, where it's, you know, it's very sci-fi influenced. It's a lot of, you know, wacky characters and colorful surroundings and all the rest of it, you know, a lot of CGI backdrops, yet unlike Ant-Man, I don't just want to compare this film to Ant-Man, but unlike a lot of the recent movies, these are characters that we care about in situations where they have agency and there is genuine peril and there's an emotional weight to the stakes. I got to be honest. I mean, to say what you will about, you know, the desperate climax of Infinity War when half the world turned to ash, this one kind of hit me. I got an emotional gut punch from this one I don't think I've ever felt in any of the Marvel movies.
Wow, that's I mean, that says a lot, James. I probably did not appreciate it to the level that you did. I went into the film, honestly, last week when we were trying to decide what films we're going to be reviewing, and you said, oh, well, you have to do Guardians of the Galaxy. I was secretly thinking, really? Do we? Okay. So I went in with lower expectations. Having said that, right at the beginning, I thought, I'm enjoying this. When they did the needle drop of Radiohead's Creep, and they did a whole kind of montage during that whole song, and just mixed with some of the humor, I thought, okay, this is good. I'm enjoying this a lot. I'm really this is working for me. Having said that, at 2 hours and 30 minutes, again, this is heavily bloated, and the second half got to the point where I was just like, oh my gosh, is this ever going to end with a never-ending series of CGI explosions? And I felt sometimes the melodrama and sentimentality was just so over the top and force fed that I missed some of the humor that I was enjoying in the first hour of the film, to the point where I got to say, one of my friends who enjoys nerd culture, lives upstairs. We often go to see these movies together. I bought tickets for Tammy and my wife, or my wife and my son, my 12-year-old son. He said, "Hey, can I join you?" So I got him a ticket. 2/3 of the way into this, I look over at him and I said, "Oh, it's losing it bad." He goes, "I'm regretting now messaging you to join me." Wow. And so we ended up in the end disappointed with this film.
Interesting. Okay, I mean, it definitely ran over long, and I think there was kind of like one big CGI climax too many. I think there's a bit where they go back onto the ship and they drop down into a dungeon area where there are the three big tentacly kind of monsters. By that, and they find all the children down there and what have you. By that stage, nothing to do with the plot and with what the characters are actually doing in those moments. I get where the story is going, but it was just sort of one situation of climactic peril too many, and I felt that because the interesting stuff, the stuff that really worked for me, the stuff that really engaged me, was all the Rocket origin story. I would say about a third of this film, or maybe not quite that much, is sort of flashbacks to Rocket's really rather torturous and unpleasant origins, how the High Evolutionary created him out of bits and pieces, essentially, in order to create the next generation of or the next step in the evolutionary cycle, so that he can repopulate this secondary Earth planet that he has created, etc., etc., etc. What you get is Rocket coming to the terms with the fact that he is, he has value, he has agency, that he is not a monster, that he is a legitimate creation, even if he wasn't created by nature, but he was created in a lab for experiments. And this motley crew of equally kind of cobbled together. It reminded me a lot of Andy, not Andy's room, but who's the evil kid that lives next door to Andy in Toy Story?
Oh yes. I know who you're talking about.
Carl, or whatever his name is, whatever that evil kid, Sid. So it reminds you a lot of those creations that Sid creates in his bedroom, where you're scared of them. Buzz was scared of them at first, but then he realizes that they're actually tortured souls themselves, and they help him escape, etc., etc. So there was a similar kind of vibe going on there, and that stuff I really, really appreciated. I got the fact that kind of cathartic moment had to come early enough that present day Rocket could be resuscitated and then get into the action for the finale.
Right.
But it almost did feel that it was coming a little bit early. The catharsis of him being rescued came a little bit early and off balance. Some of what was going on in the third act there.
Well, I agree that the whole backstory of Rocket was probably my favorite part of the whole movie, and it really legitimized, from the first two films, Rocket's almost a guardian of the galaxy in name only. He actually has a lot of trust issues. There's a lot of issues that Rocket is dealing with that we don't know exactly why he acts the way he acts, and where there's other members of the squad that are a little more guardian-like. He's not really a guardian of the galaxy. When you kind of see his backstory, and then he gets the redemption and the agency and the understanding that he now knows who he is. I loved at the very end where kind of it's a new generation of Guardians of the Galaxy, and he's rightfully the leader. He's gone from the outsider who has all these issues and is there in name only, to getting the DNA of what it means to really be a Guardian of the Galaxy. And I thought that element worked in the film.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I couldn't agree with you more. And that's why, there is a caveat to my caveat, if you like. I did feel that kind of the resurrection of Rocket came a little bit early in terms of where it's placed within the film. But you get why, because he needs to then have this this sort of third act where he then takes charge, and he survives the battle, and then he takes charge and he becomes sort of the leader. And I did like that little glimpse of perhaps, that's what the future of the franchise looks like. If the Guardians are going to continue to appear in these movies, and there's no reason why they shouldn't, that's what they're going to look like now. Whereas the suggestion is that we are no longer going to see much of Starlord. Even Mantis and Drax appear to have sort of and Nebula, have sort of gone their separate ways by the end, and that what you've got is Rocket and Groot and Adam Warlock.
Well, there's even a real evolution in Adam Warlock's character, too. He goes from, we see him at first, and he's almost Superman-esque in his superpowers. I mean, he's just a couple notches below. And we subsequently learn that he's actually pretty dim-witted, and he's a unbaked, he got pulled out of the oven a little too quick. And so he's always kind of a loose cannon. But you see him almost like Rocket. He has these issues, not the same issues, but he has these complex insecurity issues and why he acts the way he acts. And when he is exposed to empathy, somebody saving his life, understanding what a guardian of the galaxy does, like the whole nature of empathy and putting the well-being of others before yourself, the power that has on transforming someone who was one way into somebody who's someone much better. And so that's a long way of saying, if they went ahead with that team, I would love to see more of the evolution of that character, because I think there's a few stories there to be told.
Absolutely. I mean, knowing that the limited amount that I know about the character in the comics is that he is quite an important character, and that he does often team up with the Guardians of the Galaxy or become part of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So I think the intention there is that he is going to appear in multiple movies. It was funny because the character reminded me bizarrely of the character of Rocky Horror in Rocky Horror Picture Show, that he was created as this kind of like perfect Adonis like sort of human specimen, even in little gold trunks, but then you realize that he's incomplete, and that he hasn't, although he might be physically perfect, mentally he needs a lot of work, and it's only through his interaction with others and their guidance that he's able to accomplish that. And it is not and his fulfillment comes not in the role for which he was originally intended, but in something altogether more sort of sensitive and emotional and interactive.
The other thing that's not intended is now I have Frankenfurter in my head on the Guardians of the Galaxy doing his whole.
Well, they're not, at the end of the day,
doing a mashup.
They're not a million miles away. They're at the end of the day, Guardians of the Galaxy and Rocky Horror Picture Show, they're camp sci-fi adventure movies, really, with musical numbers. In the Rocky Horror Picture Show, it's actual song and dance numbers. And in the Guardians of the Galaxy, like you've already mentioned, it is these needle drops. They are essentially musical numbers. Just in another form that's not going to scare away mainstream viewers that are averse to singing and dancing. If you watch the Christmas special, which I really didn't like, there are a number of sort of live musical sort of performances in that movie, at the end culminating in Kevin Bacon actually sort of singing a song. And I think that was where my trepidation lay when I approached this movie, is because that Christmas special, which lent so heavily on the dynamic between Drax and Mantis, I found woefully unfunny. I just felt that they, although I like both those actors and I like both the characters that they created, I just found that there wasn't this kind of spark. There wasn't this chemistry in the Christmas special that they thought they had.
Right.
They thought that they were creating comedy gold, and it wasn't. It was just kind of falling flat, and their banter just really wasn't doing it for me. Here it was a lot better. They're surrounded by other people, so there's less pressure put on them working as a comedy duo so much,
right?
But I just felt that it worked really, really well. And at the end of the day, this one fell back on what I think the first Guardians of the Galaxy was, and what it did so well is just it was this sort of big, campy sort of space adventure, kind of with a sort of pirate vibe going on more than anything else. Which I think once they got sort of entangled with the rest of the Avengers and everything else, they kind of sort of lost sight of that a little bit. And this was a really nice sort of bringing it full circle, bring them back to the type of movie that the first one was and did so well.
What did you think about the surprise, maybe not so surprising cameos? I saw Michael Rosenbaum in there as playing one of the Ravengers. Is that what they're called? Ravengers? The
Ravagers, I think.
Ravagers. And then Nathan Fillion was in there as one of the head security of the I did love, it was kind of very unique or creative to have a space station that is organic in nature.
Yeah, no,
It almost had it almost had a Buckaroo Banzai across the eighth dimension aspect to it, because they would go on and everything was gooey and organic in that movie, and that kind of made me think of Buckaroo Banzai.
It's interesting because there's an element of that in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, where some of the tech there in the quantum realm is also similarly organic, where they had to like put their hands into sort of slimy pots of goo in order to pilot a spaceship, and so I was kind of thinking, okay, well this is sort of a way of tying those sort of films together, if you like, that this kind of technology does exist. But I'm glad that this film managed to stand on its own as much as it did, away from the rest of the MCU, and just be sort of a silly space movie. In terms of the cameos, I mean, Nathan Fillion, always good value. He's worked with James Gunn before in Slither, the great sort of small town slug invasion movie, which is lots and lots of fun. And Michael Rosenbaum,
Lex Luthor from Smallville. I'm a big Smallville fan, and I know that Michael Rosenbaum is friends with James Gunn, and I listen to Michael's podcast pretty regularly. So it was nice to see him in the film.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure I'd know him if I saw him, to be honest. I'm not sure
it was fairly quick. It wasn't as visible as Nathan Fillion's role, but yeah.
Okay. I kind of liked the villain, Chugwadi Iwuji, as the High Evolutionary. He's a kind of a mad, twisted scientist, as I alluded to at the beginning, in the sort of Dr. Moreau mold. If you've seen Island of Lost Souls or one of the other Dr. Moreau adaptations, he believes that he's creating a utopia, but what he's really doing is just wrecking everything. I like that, and I like the fact that you see him in this kind of Frankenstein form. So even before you learn what happened to him, you see that he is almost sort of, in a bizarre way, getting high on his own supply, if you like. He is as much a kind of Frankenstein creation as Rocket and Lila and all the other characters there. So it immediately makes him sort of other to a degree, that he is sort of less than human, more than human. There's some story there that it kind of teases for a large part of the movie. But also, it makes him, somewhat sort of grotesque and monstrous, but in a kind of understated way. I just liked that look of just having this sort of skin. It's funny because I just a couple of days earlier rewatched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where obviously Leatherface is running around, wielding this chainsaw, and he's wearing, somebody else's skin on his face. And so to see the main principal villain in a huge, great Disney movie, for want of a better way of representing the film, essentially wearing the same kind of thing as Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I was kind of like, oh well, this is why James Gunn is such a genius at what he does. I remember a lot of people said when he sort of came into the fold, when he decided to do these movies, they were like, oh, he's selling out, man, he's going mainstream. He used to be this sort of counterculture punk rock, really anarchic fringe filmmaker, making these kind of like weird exploitation movies with trauma and what have you, and this was seen as him selling out. Whereas what you have to actually recognize, he's not selling out. He's managed to sort of surreptitiously invade the mainstream, or bring all of his bizarre and wacky ideas and sensibilities into, of all places, Disney.
Yeah.
And fill their movies with all his bonkers stuff.
No, when the whole face issue, I was getting throwbacks to Doctor Who in the Russell Davies era, because there would be those kind of characters that were a little bit on the macabre, and it's what you could get away with on the BBC, but there was always a macabre element when Russell Davies was the showrunner. And knock on wood, we're going to see more of that now that he's returning in the next season as the showrunner again. But so that was the thought that I had.
When was he showrunner? Because I'm not that familiar with Doctor Who. Who was Doctor? Who was the Doctor?
Christopher Eccleston, then David Tennant, mostly the David Tennant David Tennant years. So yeah, there was I was getting that Doctor Who Russell Davies vibe, and so I didn't realize that James Gunn had the same kind of expressions.
Yeah, I just think it's beyond impressive what he's been able to do and what he's managed to convince Disney to let him do. Really.
Well, what's interesting is they let him go. Obviously, and we don't have to go
this project. Yeah.
Of this project, and he had such the respect of the cast that the cast literally petitioned to bring him back. And I think I was reading an article that were saying if even one person had said no, I'm not going to do it, it would have fallen apart. But that was obviously James Gunn has such a respect for the people he works with, and that really speaks volumes to me. That when someone is creative and they're working at the top of their game and actors feel like they're respected, they want that person back in. And so it's unfortunate I didn't like the movie near as much as you did, though. I did feel it was bloated. I felt they could have saved a lot of money, just have a couple scenes with a lot more funny things happening, like just scenes of people interacting, Peter Quill acting really funny rather than just endless CGI. And that leads me to one other point I had made a note on. I'm thinking of a lot of TV shows and science fiction. The spaceship that the people have, it becomes iconic. Firefly, we know what that ship looks like. The Enterprise, even something like Red Dwarf, where it's a big, garbage scow spaceship. It has an iconic resonance with the people. Damned if I know what that ship is that the Guardians of the Galaxy have. Like I'm thinking the Millennium Falcon, when you see it, it is iconic. When you hear the engines on the Millennium Falcon, you know it. It makes that particular whine. I'm thinking Guardians of the Galaxy needs a ship that's iconic with engines that are linked to them as a group, that you just know the Guardians of the Galaxy have arrived. And I feel they just have this generic CGI ship that makes it's indistinguishable from 50 other sci-fi shows that have ships that are running around with no resonance with with the fan base. So that's my opinion on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. They clamber into this ship and fly off at the beginning, and the only thing I remember about it is that it kind of spins around as it kind of takes. Is it the same ship they had in the previous movie? I don't know. I think
that's the thing. You can't remember.
Right.
Yeah.
What you're saying is absolutely legit, and for a story in which so much time is spent flying from one moon base to another moon base, from one planet to another planet, in supposedly the same ship. Yeah, I think it did deserve to be something a little bit more iconic.
Yeah.
In terms of what you said about it needs to be funnier, and it needs to it needed less big CGI things. I mean, I think it was funny enough, and I think that when it wasn't being funny, it was aiming for something more, something in addition to. I think they were striving to be like, sure, we'll be funny, but we also want, in addition to being funny, to be this, want to make a point, want to be resonant on an emotional level, want to get some catharsis and closure for some of these characters. In terms of the big CGI spectacle, I mean, this is just a gilded cage of their own making. This is just the problem with being 32 films deep into a franchise where, even the very first movie, I mean, yes, it looks ridiculously modest by these, but by now, but even Iron Man is a big sort of action movie, and by the Avengers in 2012, you're like, well, where are they going to go from here? And where they've ended up going is just, they're stretching the universe wider and wider and wider to the point where it becomes, maybe untenable, perhaps. And so I'm not gonna defend these big CGI set pieces. I don't think they need them. I think we've got beyond that, where the characters should have enough agency on their own, that we don't need the fate of the universe to be in peril every time. But if you want Disney to pay $200 million for the movie, and if you want, then it needs to make, $600 million to turn a profit, then, people are only going to come out now into a movie theater to see big explosions, sadly.
You may be right there, but for me, and having Nathan Fillion in this movie just really reminded me how much this crew is like the Firefly crew that he was there, that Nathan Fillion had captained. And I'm just thinking they had a fraction of the special effects budget on that show, but you put those charismatic characters around a galley kitchen table and just have them banter for 5 minutes, you could save yourself $50 million because there's no explosions involved. It's just great dialogue, people being funny. And I would argue what Firefly did well, that Guardians of the Galaxy sometimes reaches, but never quite does near as good as Firefly did, is being able to mix that sentimentality and that friendship, which, is above anything else, with taking the mickey out of each other. Just totally, just totally eviscerating your friend.
Eviscerating.
Yeah,
eviscerating.
Yes,
eviscerating. Yeah.
Is this the cold open now?
Have you forgotten what you were going to say now?
Yeah, I was just gonna say they're able to.
You've eviscerated that thought. Yeah.
That thought. Yeah, and they can. It doesn't have to be one or the other. They can build that sentimentality and that camaraderie and that feeling of achieving something bigger than themselves at the same time, just kind of taking the mickey out of each other. And
I mean, I think they're comparable, to be honest. I mean, I think you're holding up the highest possible standard and watermark. I mean, Firefly is, arguably the pinnacle of that kind of anti-hero pirate, space pirate kind of concept. And go, well, it's not as good as this. It's like, sure, but that's the pinnacle. That's the best. And I think Firefly, because of its lower budget, couldn't fall back on splashy set pieces and action. And because of that, they were forced to sit around a table and take the piss out of each other.
And have good writing, good solid writing. That was
I think that's the byproduct of having a lower budget, is that as we record this, we're in the midst of a writer's strike, right? And it's like, yes, good writing is cheaper than special effects, is the sad truth. And and so so it's cheaper to pen a witty galley scene than it is to do a big sci-fi explosion. And and I think the key, I think Firefly, Joss Whedon would have loved more money to do more CGI, more big space stuff in his show. And if they weren't beholden to the demands of the blockbuster model, I'm sure James Gunn would have probably wanted to rein it in a little bit. I think it swings and roundabouts. It's 6 of one and half dozen of the other, and it's all about finding something that appeases everybody, including the bean counters. But
well, James, we're going to need an instrument of measurement. How are we going to grade Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3?
Well, I was thinking about this. Perhaps little rescued baby raccoons, something nice.
That sounds good.
Cute.
Yeah, something sweet.
Yeah,
that have not had their
arguably too many
yet.
for him to carry.
Oh, that was so sweet.
I was trying to watch through tears in that space. I'm a big softie when it comes to animals.
I knew he was going to let them all, like, it comes back to like Iron Man 2 when he has a choice when they're falling out, how many people he's going to save. And I leaned over to Tammy, he's going to save all of them. And that's what Rocket did. Rocket's going to save all of them.
Got to go back for all, and they're like, we got all the children, not the children, everybody else.
No,
that stuff I love. And I think it deserves great respect that arguably one of the most sympathetic and emotionally energized characters in this entire franchise, if not the entire MCU, is a CGI raccoon. Which and credit where it's due. I know we've been bashing the CGI elements of this movie. Not that bit. The character creators who handle that element part of the CGI where you're creating and emoting, a character like Rocket and his contemporaries. Amazing job. Amazing.
Yeah, and I would argue that's where CGI works, because when it really actually connects to your emotion, it's great. But when it is just mud against the wall and we're hoping some of it'll stick, that's where you lose me. And so many of some of these space opera type explosion, and this is going, and it's not 4 fighters going against 4 fighters. We got 4,000 going against 4,000. It just becomes a cartoon, as I've said many times before. But when it's done well, like Rocket, I agree. Bingo.
On that note, how many baby CGI raccoons out of 5? I really like this. I liked it more than I thought I would. I thought I was wallowing in the depths of superhero comic book movie fatigue, franchise fatigue, particularly in the wake of Ant-Man. And then this came along and I was like, you know what? Yeah, it's not perfect. Yeah, some of the things we've talked about, particularly in the third act, have pacing problems, and it's one set piece too many. But the good stuff in this movie, and there's plenty of it, is so good that I really want to throw a spotlight on that and basically sort of say, that stuff was good enough to outweigh the flimsier elements, because I think the flimsy elements are almost by this point generic to the model, if you like. They're not a problem per se with this film so much as they are with big blockbuster franchise tentpole movies like this. So by that caveat, I'm going to give this one a nice, fluffy, generous, two-handed 4 baby CGI raccoons out of 5.
Great, James. I'm going to go a little bit lower than you. I initially,
you have no heart.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. You're dead inside.
It's not there. That's right. They're going to have to evolve me. The high evolutionary is going to have to evolve me further, because I'm definitely don't have the heart. No, I think the first 45 minutes of this show, of this film, I was thinking, wow, this is really this. I'm going to enjoy this. This is good. I'd gone in thinking, okay, this is going to be okay. I'll give this 3.5. I'm already starting to think, oh, it's a nice 3.5. Then it was like 3. And then I was like looking at it and going, okay, 2.5. I'm just thinking, oh, is this ever going to end? And it had its moments, as I alliterated, but by and large, I'm just going to come out and say, this is not a film you have to see. I'm tempted, because of our conversation, to up my 2.5 raccoons to 3.
I do try.
But I'm going to hold my ground on this one and tell people, listen, if you're 12, like my 12-year-old loved this film. Man, he was just over the moon. It was, if you're 12 years old, this is going to really hit the sweet spot.
Thanks.
But if there's our cold open. But at 2.5 hours of CGI, like, whoa, there was just too little meat on the bone. I'm going to have to, but it wasn't a horrible movie. I'm not giving it 1 or a half or anything like that. 2.5 raccoons saved, precious little raccoons, out of all of them, because I don't have a heart. But that's what James and I think about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. What do you think? I mean, obviously we differed a little bit on our appraisal of this film, but what do you have to say about it? Leave a comment in the comment box below. James?
Yeah, that's right. Where do you think this stands in the MCU, particularly in post Endgame MCU? Phase 4, Phase 5. I think this is pretty high up there in these later movies. And where do you stand on the CGI? Particularly characters versus backdrops versus big explosions. Is enough? Do you think they can get away with stripping some of that back? We want to hear from.
Until next episode.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.